First of all, I'm Director of Native Student Services here. Operate and run the Native Student Services at the University of South Dakota. I come from area, Rosebud Sioux Tribe in White River. It's a Minnesota or the White River area, and my mother's family are related a lot to two different reservations, actually three. One reservation is the Oglala Sioux Tribe. I have a lot of relatives over there. My mother's sister was Esther Moose Camp, and so I'm related to the Moose Camp over there in Wombly, and because Wombly used to be part of Rosebud a long time ago. East called it Lives Camp, but it's such a long ways from Wombly to Rosebud, walk by when they went to Pine Ridge, and now they're part of Pine Ridge. So, but that family over there, I'm related to them in that way. And my grandmother, she was a Jandrew, and my mother's mother, and then she's from a little place called Greenwood in Yahoktwani, Oyate. So we used to call her, I knew her ever since I was small, even though she is amongst us Lakotas for a long time, Sicangus, she was always known as Wichela, the ones who speak with D's. And Wichela, so, and then from there she's related to the people up in the Standing Rock area too. So I have relatives, and then on my father's side were Sicangu from Rosebud, specifically out by north of Mission. There's where my father they come from, and my grandfather's family, they're all from that area, that particular area, Oak Creek in that area. So I come from I guess that family line, the White Horses. Nancy Dinelk married a White Horse, Sam White Horse, and we're related to a lot of the White Horses and the Pinos, and just a lot of people in that in a Mission area, Mission, South Dakota area. My grandfather's side, through Joe Dinelk, they had he's a Wapia Wichasha, and he's a healer in that. In fact, he was the one that used to made a commitment to walk to Cheyenne River to go up to our relatives up there with the sacred pipe with Tonashi Orville. Before that, his father Stanley, so he'd go up there and do a ceremony, and then bring the Chinupa out, sacred pipe out, and then on my mother's side, related to the White Bears, and Grandpa Shelby White Bear, Shelbert White Bear, he's a UEP Wichasha, and then through on into my mother's sister's family, in that way through marriage, then related to Moose Camp, then they're bundle keepers too, so in the early years growing up, to me that was just a natural way of life. I didn't know that I didn't know that ceremonies were something different than what other people did. I just thought, in my growing up, I just thought that was the way of life that everybody had, So I didn't know any different till probably a little bit later in life. So I guess when I look at life, the worldview of life, and looking at when I look at the winged people and all that lives in the root people, I see that they're all how I grew up, and understandings that they all are teachers. They're all our relatives. There's nothing symbolic about it. It's natural life flow. It's a spirit. And later on in life, when I looked at that and said, how do I communicate, or how do I articulate this with this mainstream society, and throughout doing some research of my own and finding different things out, listening to elders and listening to other healers, and listening to the healers of the earth walk, our mothers, and grandmothers, you learn that everything has a nahi, a spirit in it, and then everything has the spirit in everything, and everyone has its own properties and its own way of interacting with life, and its own way of bringing messages. And in human beings, those are things that come from the heart and understood in the mind. And in the heart is called nahila. It's the emotional aspect of relationships and interrelationships, and how we relate one to another, and then what kind of relation we are, and then what kind of relative that we become, and then what kind of relationship we have. When we can balance those four quadrants, and then we understand the interrelationships. That's where that's where the animal and just all of life, and that common understanding. It's common understandings. That's the gift, the common man, the common human, common. And that means doesn't have a gender, like in a mainstream society. It just talks about we're made of this earth, and as humans, but everything within the water, air, everything has that spirit. And if we take a look at it in modern science, that spirit, they can call that spirit, can have a name too. And in modern science, it'd be gravity. Gravity is in Mother Earth, from which we come, and it's in every single thing. Everything, no matter what it is, gravity is in her. So Mother Earth spirit's in everybody, in everything. And each one of us have our path, in the way we walk on this earth, and everybody's path belongs to them in connection with Creator, but has to be taught by the Mother Earth. Our lifelong lesson is we come through Mother Earth, and so she teaches us. So every year we go back to listen to the birds, and we go back to listen to the different animals and insects and the plants and the trees and the wind as they sing and bring us the songs. We go back and we listen to all of these to remind us of what our journey is here, and we even put those into ceremonies that we call part of the 7 sacred rites, the Humbalecha, Sundance, Wewangwachi. It's all of the ceremonies are attached to Mother Earth. There isn't one ceremony that we do that doesn't attach to Mother Earth or come from Mother Earth. So each one of these are ways of life. We're messengers to each other. And sometimes I always talk about, I wonder what it would be like how much humility that we can have and understanding we would have if someday we were flying up in the air and looking down on the ground, and there's a lot of Mambaleo out there, a lot of eagles down there dancing, and they had a human femur, they had a human head and saying they're blessed, so what understanding that they must have, what's humility that they would sacrifice that vessel or that body that they would have so someone else would find life in it, So each one of these areas we have to look at how that other life forces may view the life that we're living, and view the life and how we are and how they give of themselves so that we can all live. And then as human beings, are we capable of doing that too? Are we able of giving of ourselves to give life to others? And simple as it's a miracle, yet as simple as planting a tree, and when you take a tree's life, then do you replant trees? Do you make a commitment to donate your body so that trees in the future can live, so that you can be part of the nitrates that help that tree, so you make that commitment in prayer. So it's in the circle of life we all interact that way. And all of these different these different life forces, animals, it seemed like sometimes some people, because a particular messenger comes and gives a message, sometimes our people get so excited when they, I'll give you an example, get excited when they see an eagle, and again they get excited when they see an owl, but the excitement's in different ways, but the bottom line is they're both just messages, carrying the message. And a lot of times in Lakota, when people see an eagle, or nowadays just about any indigenous and other people who are learning the indigenous ways, they get excited when they see an eagle. But a long time ago amongst our people, they kind of avoided, they didn't really avoid, but they got a little bit nervous or uptight or stressed when they seen an eagle, because they knew that there was a reason why the Wambali was coming from the Creator and look upon this earth and to bring a message, and they knew that the message is very important. And they knew that when they received this message that they would have to live it. So that's why it was Wonihincha. They got kind of nervous inside, because that means they're being called to a life way that they may not be familiar with, or even if they are, it may be hard to carry, hard to walk. So people will always give out offering and thanks and connection with that Wambali for the message, but that means then you're living a life through being called and being directed through the Earth Mother, through the inhabitants of Earth Mother. And then people in modern day, they get real scared and nervous when a hiha or an owl comes, and they think that immediately there's death, there's some kind of bad thing's going to come, and if you really look at it with the eagle and the owl, they bring a message of the energy source, the nahi, the spirit that's coming, and spirit is non-physical, so it can be altered, it can be altered before it manifests into physical. So through your intention in your spirit, in that intention in your spirit, and combined with Creator, all that created everything, you can alter that, and some people call that prayers or offerings, or putting the truth and then turning it back over to the one that created all of it so that it can be altered. So they're all messengers, no matter what. Every single day we walk in life, just imagine like a shunka, a dog, you know, he offers a message when people are coming, he announces it, right? And he lets you know if they're friendly or not, you know, if they're good people or not, because the dog's energy is reading that person's energy, you know. You can, I heard one time someone say, if you really think you're somebody, go pet a stranger's dog, you know. He'll let you know where, you know, if you are somebody or not. But so everything like this, they carry messages. Shunko will tell you when the energies around the immense amount of gravity, in other words, there's a intent that's pulling gravity together, and those are called nachis, or the spirit. That so they can tell you when there's spirits around. You know, a lot of times what they do is they run and they'll bark and real high, and then pretty soon they'll look towards where that's at, and if it's challenging, they'll put their ears up, and if it's something that's really, really powerful, and they don't understand it themselves, or it can be not a good thing, and then they put their ears back, you know, tail down. Then they'll run, and if it's real close, if that spirit has an intention that, and it comes real close, and the dogs will run and throw themselves against the wall, you know, because it's overpowering. Same with the cat, Igamula. The cat will just look and stare exactly where that spirit is, and if it's an alarming spirit, then the cat will arch his back and pull his tail up and put his ears forward, you know, and the hair would stand up, the fur would stand up. But if it's a good spirit, then the cat will just sit there and be real calm and look directly at that spirit, you know. Okay? So I guess I'm talking about how all of these they're messengers. They tell you of not only of this world here, but the other world. And I think if we become aware of that, then we can understand that how to live and interact in this life. We don't have to. It's good to go and get a lot of knowledge, and those things are good. Most of that is just based on human behavior, you know, and human behavior and human interpretation of natural events, or, you know, that's what they are. It's still to the level of human cognition and interpretation. But if we really open our spirit, our heart, and our mind, and we can hear all the other life forces that are around us, let alone, I know we go way out in space looking for life, and a lot of times we don't understand the very life that's around us, and we don't interact with them. So I grew up on a ranch since I was 6 years old, so in that ranch I learned a lot of things, and one of the great teachers I had in my life was the horse, Shuaka Horse Nation, and they know immediately what's at the core of a human being. You know, they say, well, Makashka, what Makashka means is that they go beyond the veil of the humanity, you know, and they go beyond that veil and they look directly towards the core, and they feel that core, you know. So they know when you're sad, they know when you're happy, and they know when you're perplexed, they know when, and so they'll intercede and try to guide you, and they too know when there's other spirits around, when there's other life forces around that non-physical, because they'll do the same thing. They'll put their ears straight forward and stare directly at it, and if it's a challenging kind of spirit, then what they do is their skin ripples and the tail comes up, and And if it's a really a spirit that maybe with the intent that's not good, then generally the horses, they naturally go left, excuse me. But in that case, when there's a spirit coming around, then they'll start spinning to the right. That tells you right now, get yourself ready, smudge yourself off, pray, and neutralize the spirit, send it back where it come from. So we know that in communicating with the different life forces, we know what to do. We know how to do it. We know. So we know that when they have sadness, that we can sing a song when their nation or someone from their nation passes on. We sing a song, we pray, and the intent and energy of what we do as humans gives them messages back, just like they're giving us messages back. So that happens the same way with the root nations. All these different medicines that we have. They, today they have people called herbalists and botanists, people who study these things, and that's good, because even in people studying all of this, they find out as they go on deeper and deeper into their studies and looking into the plants and looking into our relatives, the Wohuntka, the root people, and they found out that at the core of every one of those, their life forces, the benzing ring, in a benzing ring is what's at the core is the most important, because for them it's magnesium. That's their bloodline, and they have a community or a family around them. And the benzing ring, there's 5 areas that they have that support that community, a family. Tiwahi Tioshbai is Tiowewe, related by blood, and the families, the groups, the groupings, and then pretty soon the nations. So they find out that even in there that they're supported by a family unit within the benzing ring, and at the core is, like I said, it's magnesium. And human beings, we have exactly the same one at the cell level, and ours is iron, and that's our blood, our way, all the way back to Creator. There's the chlorophyll, goes all the way back to Creator. So what's at the core is the most important thing, and we're all supported by the same family. That's how we can communicate, We can communicate if you sit there and listen, and they'll teach you a lot just by observation, Different trees teach you different things. They talk to you about, like the evergreens, the Chanteweate, they teach you about resiliency. They're retaining who you are and standing strong in where you are and producing seeds that will help other life forms that come. And there's different kinds, and they're all related, They're all related. They're Kahashis and Hankashi. There's cousins, and they're related too, and they each have a different medicine and a different purpose. So our plant nations are just like us, and at the very core, we come from the very same DNA, the structures, cell structures and everything, yet we're different, and walk in different ways, perceive in different ways, see things in different ways, and how we depend on one another to be able to sustain life, and produce life and sustain life. But once again, that all goes back to the Earth Mother. Our people tell us that when we came, the reason is that we hear a lot of times other people, they kind of talk about native people. They worship the earth, they worship the sun, worship, and first of all, the word worship it doesn't apply, So for us, it's yonia. We honor, we respect, we honor and we have respect for the relationship, and that's what people call worship. That's the difference between the European understanding and cognition of life than ours. They have things like they talk about the worship, and they have things like necessity for forgiveness. And for Lakotas, it's not the issue of forgiveness; it's the issue of remaking your relationship again, reconnecting to be part again. That means if you become whole and reconnect again, and then you can be part of that whole. If you're disconnected, then you'll never be part of that whole. And so you'll always be outside the camp, you'll never be inside. So once you're whole, then you're restored back to the hoop, the sacred hoop. So our way of life is so we reconnect with our relatives. So each one of these, like talk about the root nation, they teach us, and the different plants, they teach us, and our and we're not only connected to that from this earth, but we're connected to the sky. We're connected to the multiverses, not just the universe, but multiverses, the many we're connected to. And everything that we learned before we came into this earth is reflected in the sky. It's reflected in our relatives. We call them Wichachbi. The Wichach is Chbi. It talks about where the flesh of the star, the composition of who we are is the exact composition of what the stars are. And those were there, and then that was solidified when it came to Mother Earth to be a human being. If we went someplace else, we would be something else, but through Mother Earth we became a human being, and in that way, and used Mother Earth properties. So amongst our people, we talk about from the Wakan that's created everything, and then came through being the Dakwaka, something that's part of this essence, this original, and then Dakwaka, and then that's where that free will, or that's where we come through, and then it talked about the first physical properties where that our people come through. This all relates, but the trees, everything relates back to this, is that we came through fire and to have life. And even, I think, modern science talks about you can have all the chemicals in the world, but unless you have fire, you won't have life. So they tell us that we came through our grandfather's son. And in there we took on our first properties, which are the gases, or like helium and things like that. So we took on the first properties to learn the balance of those properties. Once we learned that, then we were able to go on the derivatives of those properties, and then that's where we call the Wichachbi of the stars, came to being. And then later on, some people call, even though we are a star, they call it a planet. There's still a star. So from there, we came to this earth, and then we took on the properties of this earth. So we have to live within Mother Earth's laws, no matter what we do. And that's the reason for having all these different disciplines and studies and ways of life, that we have to work within these frameworks to be able to live in this earth. So learning more that we can about how they teach us. We're learning on 2 tracks now. That's what I'm so excited about, the field of education, and our young people becoming educated, that they would not only see the science, and they would understand the science and be able to do math and just everything that's offered here at the university, or any university, and then be able to match that with their indigenous knowledge. And I think that really goes beyond the edge of the envelope, is to listen to our elders and our old people and research and do some of the things, read about some of the things that were put out there, just like what you're doing, you're recording now, and that they can go back and look at those stories, and then to even go further, for them to hear the plants, them to hear the animals, for them to hear and see and feel and experience the teachings of those teachers. You may want to someday go on a hill and pray and really reconnect with Mother. Things that they can do, they can try to catch the dark from the light and light from the dark as they're sitting there. And many years of trying to do that, never could do it. And then the colors that come to being in different seasons when you're sitting there, the colors that come to the earth and the color, the rainbows in the sky. And then the air that's different, and the animals that are different each season. The air, it teaches you how to prepare, how to listen, how to breathe. So all of these teachers, the air teaches a lot, tremendous. Sometimes it shows itself so that you can have faith. Wowichala, you can have understanding that there's life inside of you. And in fall and winter time and early spring and Nari, the breath, Onia Nari, we see that combined in Mother Earth's laws, and that breath that we see comes out of our mouth, and then it's mixed with the air and the water, so then it looks like steam and Oshote, but that's a Nari, that's a spirit of our breath appearing, showing itself, that we have life inside too. Life. So when we study these different plants and the life inside of them, what's inside of them and not just what's outside, and why are they the way they are. Our people understood these things a long time ago. They'd seen the star in the middle of a Wachanga, a cottonwood tree. They'd seen the star, where we come from, the stars. We chachbi, we're flesh of the stars. We remember that in the Sundance, a flesh offering. We return that back, flesh offering of the mother, which is her children, mother and father, children. So that star in a cottonwood, our people understood the properties of the cottonwood, so they would, a long time ago when the soldiers used to come, they would have to find, the soldiers would have to find a body of water, a river or puddle or something to be able to water their horses and water themselves, and their people were on the run, and they knew that our relative would help them, and they would go and pray and tap into the cottonwood, and about halfway up, and all that water would come out, so they'd drink that and have the nutrients in it, and they'd move on. So our people were very wise in understanding nature, because they depended on nature, and they knew that nature depended on them. It's reciprocal, and when you give, you take. When you take, you give, and that way, because it all belongs to Creator, not us. So each one of these trees and plants, we can go along and talk about each one of them, but they're messengers. They're lessons that are standing there. But we have to become aware of that. We have to. I also talk about the human being needs to have a way of letting go of that ego and start going with the we-go,
Yeah.
instead of ego. So become a relative. Learn how to relate. Once you learn how to relate, you'll understand how relative you are. Once you understand how relative you are, you can make a relation. Once you make a relation, then you can make a relationship. That's a two-way street now. And then once you do that, and you can balance those, then it's an interrelationship. That's mitakwi oyasi. That's what that's talking about.
This bird, do you recognize that bird at all? People don't see it very often, but
Not the osprey?
no, it's actually a falcon.
Okay.
And in Lakota or Dakota, how would you reference that bird? I mean, what word would you use? Is it Satan or Chetan? Does that sound familiar?
Chetan.
Chetan.
Yeah. it's a combination. People use that a lot, but that's really the hawk.
Okay.
So.
As opposed to Wombly, which is the eagle.
Eagle, yeah. I guess I'm trying to.
Well, how about magpie? What do you know what the reference is in the language to magpie, or is it just we just tend to use the word magpie now?
Yeah. I think. Wait, you're making a shift here, and I'm trying to.
Right.
Yeah. I think. I have in with what I was talking about.
Sure.
I have I was just gonna tell a story about one of our relatives
Okay.
and that's my mind was all
Okay. Well, let's do
so
that. I didn't
that's
mean to interrupt.
Yeah, and yeah, your need might be a little bit different than that.
Right. But go ahead and it had gotten you going in a line of thinking. So let's try to finish that up, though. What was the story that you were thinking?
The one of the ones that I wanted to talk about. You hear a lot about people talk about the tricksters, and
Right. Okay.
people talk about the Heoka, and they're are, I guess, modern day. Even though it doesn't have the spiritual attachment, the energy force attachment to it, but it's in a way it does, and it's today you would call them maybe the clowns, or but with the tricksters, they bring out something within you that exists in you that you may be hiding yourself from, or you may not be aware of, or it may be something that needs to be looked at that would cause an anger within you, or it caused discomfort within you. So their purpose, it seemed, on the human and this earth level, is to be able to move past all of those things of the ego and get to the core and bring that forth. And they have a real hard, not hard, but they have a calling too that they have to do to bring those things out. And they don't do it in a vicious or malicious way. They do it in a way that's truthful, yet it has no value to them personally. They're just doing almost like a service. They're doing something that has to be done, but they personally have no investment in it, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. They just have to carry it out. The Heoka, a lot of times people call those contraries in the South, they call them like the coyote, and in this area, people call them the trickster, the Iktomi, but personally, I don't ever use that reference. Probably a few years ago, it'd have to maybe be about 20, 25, around there, 25 years ago. I think there was an artist, one of our native artists, his name is Vic Runnels, and he worked out in the western South Dakota out there. And he just came up with a new concept back then, and I traveled around doing something that we brought together called Red Road Approach. And So we're given a workshop. My brother Rick Thomas Isanti and I, and then my brother, his name was Lorenzo. He's gone back home in the spirit world now, but we're up there in Bismarck, North Dakota at UTEC, and we're giving a workshop. So I got up, and because Vic asked me, he had a bottle there, and then he had a web around it, a spider and a web. He said, don't drink because this is a trickster, you know, this bottle will trick you into thinking you're nice looking, whatever, toughest person around, whatever. And I said, okay, and so I presented that and had the concept that he presented and talked about trickster, and everything went well that afternoon. And that night we went to bed. You hear all of a sudden, I was sleeping really, really good, and all of a sudden this spider come up at my toe, tip of my toe, and he said, hey, Oksila, he said, hey, he said, what you told him today is wrong. He said, I'm going to tell you the truth. So I couldn't move, you know, I wanted to move, but I couldn't even holler, you know, because he was sitting there, you know. I couldn't move, and in Lakota they call way naji, your blood stopped, you know. And so here he crawled over, and he came up to my knee, and he said, today we check at the hecha to Shnelo. He said, what you told him today is not the truth. So he said, you call us backwards, he said. He said, you call us backwards, but he said, you humans are the ones that are backwards. He said, everything that the love, the compassion that Creator has for this earth. He said, Creator brings that, and we sit there, and we filter the full force of the Creator's love, the compassion. We filter that, and we turn around and we give you just enough that you can absorb it and you can continue in your life. So we're the ones that filter all that for you, and we bring it to you through this fire, lightning, wakia, through our relative, the shunka, the dog. So in that dog is the same wakia, electromagnetic energy, that it is in the West. That's it. So he said, we filter this and we bring just enough to you that you can change your life and you can come back alive again, fully alive. So that's what we do, yet you call us backwards and you laugh at us. So, but you're the ones that are backwards. So remember that, he said. So tell them tomorrow, he said, you tell them the truth. You go back there tomorrow, when you talk, you tell them what I just told you. I said, don't make nothing up, nothing. Tell the truth of it. He said, we filter that. We just let it. So we hold back all that. If we just let it through, we didn't do that, it'll blow you away. That's a lawaka. Too much power there. So we do that. That's how we hold it. And so he said, and I'm going to show you that you're not dreaming. He crawled up and he walked up to the right to the point of my knee. He took one leg and he said, Lewanlaka. He said, you see this? He said, then he put it down in my leg. It looked like a hot knife through butter. It just went right through. And instantly pain just shot all the way up my body, up to my, oh, it hurt. I couldn't move, I couldn't talk, I couldn't. And then he pulled it out. He said, oh, he said, if you tell them the truth, then you're going to be okay. If you don't, this is going to stay here. And he said, Tuksha, I'll talk to you again. He said, when I finish, then he'll talk to me again. So he left. He went, hey, at that point when he finally left, my toe, when it disappeared, I could finally move, and oh man, I moved. I was sweating and covered with sweat. And my brother, he said, "What's wrong?" He said, "Something's wrong." So I said, "Turn the light on." So they turned the light on him, and Rick Thomas said, "Here." I pulled my blanket down here. My leg was about 4 times its size, and there's a red mark running all the way up it. So Rick said, "Oh," I said, "Man, I can't." I tried to stand on it. I couldn't. It hurt so bad and everything. And so I told my brother, I said, "Burn some sage." And so he did. And I told him what happened. Here, Rick said, "I'll go get you crutches." All right. So he got up and went downtown someplace, and he got crutches, And next day I hobbled in there and said the opening prayer. Then I told him, I said, "What I told you last night was wrong. Yesterday about that he told me being backwards." And so I told him just the way it was, and just the way I was told, So then I had my crutches, and then I did my session, and I finished, and I sat down. And my brother said, "I'm going to go outside and smoke a cigarette." I said, "I'll come out there with you." I said, I don't smoke, but I said, "I'll come out." I said, "Okay." He said, so my brother ran, so we went out there and we stood outside here. I didn't feel that pain in my foot, so I had boots on, so I put my crutches aside and I pulled up, and it was all gone. It was just natural, just regular. No pain whatsoever. So I didn't even need the crutches. I walked back in there and just kind of carried them with me. And so when sometimes deep inside these messengers, they bring us a life teaching event, life, all these different ones, they can bring messages that alter your life, So from that day on, I've never said, that, and I understand that, I understand the message that he brought, and other peoples of the world, they have, if you look throughout the different peoples of the world, you're going to find out that they have messengers that hold back the unbridled glory of God, they call, so that the human beings can absorb just what they need. And so throughout the world, they have all these different messengers from the Earth Mother that do this for us. And so each one of these light forces there, if we would just listen and stop, and then they teach us, they tell us. And the Ikchiwichasha, the common human, means that you have the common knowledge and a common way of life, living in a community, that it's so common and it's so ordinary, and you live that every day. Pretty soon people start thinking that you're extraordinary, but you're just ordinary. That's the gift, that to be common is one of the greatest gifts in this earth, so that you can absorb what you need from these relatives that hold this glory back, all this beauty, this wakandas, and absorb it to the level that you need, that you can become relative with everything, and you can relate to everything. And so that's just one of the stories that that I thought I would share, because it teaches us that it's not just, it's cute, like, so you're talking about the, I think earlier you're talking about the magpies, how they like to really shout and argue or go back and forth, and they say a lot and everything, but if you take a look at the messages that each one of them give, that there's a real deep message for us there, and for us to understand. And a lot of times it's the human qualities that we put into them that we think they're really nice and cute, like the blackbird flying too high and getting scorched, got to close to the sun, those are human qualities that we put to them. And we do that to each other because we not only do that to the trees, the roots, the air, we do that to, we're giving human qualities to these animals, to these wamakashka, these sacred beings, these beings on this earth who are living in harmony with the earth energies. And that's where we think it's nice, but in actuality, if you really look at it, they have their own life and their own way of being and their own way of teaching and their own way, yet we give it human qualities, so what? So we can understand it. Not for them, but for us. But if we really listen to them, they're teaching us stories that are beyond that, beyond the elementary level of those things being taught. So it's good to take a look at things like you can be like the matho, you can be strong like the bear. You can or sometimes you hear people say, don't be sleeping so long, you turn into a matoi. They turn into a bear, but or you see people who are territorial, they might be powerful, but they're very territorial, and then you would say, well, you're kind of like the bear, and thinking that, yet the bear teaches even more than that,
Right.
each one of us. So as we look at these things, it's I guess what I'm getting at is that the more insight, opening ourselves up so we can hear the lessons. And I wonder if any hunters ever sit out there and in their sport and ever wonder that, what's going to give its life, for what purpose, and what am I returning to that life, and even if, what am I giving? If I'm taking this, then what am I giving back? What am I, those kind of things. Just different lessons, that need to be learned.
Right.
So,
The another area that I think it would be good to hear from, and I appreciate you, giving me the greater depth there. There's some attributes the bear on the one level may have some personified attributes that we put on him, but there's also the deeper level of the medicine that's associated with the bear, and the elk. You might say the elk, wow, he's romantic, but on a deeper level, there's a description of relationship going on there that's more powerful. You kind of said it throughout, but each of the people I talk to, when they think about the intent of the project to help mainstream society to appreciate animals, they all have a thought about that, about if you really want to know, and you've kind of talked about it a little bit, if you really want to know or hear the message, what should a kid do, or what should then Indian or non-Indian, what should people do if they really want to show respect or learn about animals? What kind of reaction do you have to that comment?
Listen. I think that's what's really, I think, to a lot of our young people, is that people are listening to them, and so we're teaching them now to listen to other life forces, even though they hear them all the time. They hear them and they see them, and so as big people or older people, we discount that, because we've come to a position where unless something's proven as what we call proven as fact, empirically studied or proven as fact, we don't really hold it as truth. So we really depend on a belief system. We depend on a belief system. Something's repeated over and over, then it must be true. It must be. But children operate from the view of knowing. When you know something inside and you still can articulate it and you feel it and see it, then you have no need for a belief system, because you know it. Yet adults who have a belief system are trying to know. and get these young ones to believe. So we come with that same ideology and trying to teach them about nature, about animals, when children in reality just need to take them out to nature, be part of nature, be part of the songs. A lot of our songs come from the wind going through the trees and the leaves. And our songs come that way. Actually, there's a world of difference between teaching and learning. And left to themselves, and then a lot of these young people will learn. It's like a long time ago, today there's a lot of people, I make an analogy, our people are teaching Lakota. And when we grew up, Lakol Wonga Lakokile, Chakakach, says I can scrape my throat talking Lakota, I can make Shakespeare reach for a dictionary, Lakota, but we weren't taught Lakota. We learned Lakota. Observation, Wakita, Dakunach Umpi, we hear it. Daku Kiutra, we tried things. Untapi, we ate it. Omanapi, we smelt it. The whole life experience, holistically, we learned. But today we're trying to teach them. We'll take one piece of that out there, we're trying to teach them. And it's hard to do that when they're not learning. It's hard to teach someone something when they don't have the opportunity to learn. To learn, it has to be collective, holistic, interrelational. So what opportunities do we have for that to exist? So it's the same way with our young people. They have to learn it. So you have to be out in nature. You have to interact with nature. And then get our own perspectives out of the way. A lot of confusing perspective we have in trying to teach our young ones is, for example, give an example of amongst the native, the Lakota and many indigenous populations, is that one of our greatest relatives, one of our greatest teachers, and but there's no such thing as greatest teachers, but a good teacher is the Zuzecha, the snake people, the snake nation. Our Zuzecha have to teach us a lot. They teach us transformation. They teach us letting go. They teach us so many things that if we just sit and listen to. And today, a lot of our people, it's hard for them to let go. It's hard for them to transition. It's hard for them. Some of them try to, if they were a Zuzecha, they try to back into their old skin, And I think it's a lot of therapeutic things going around today called things like adult children and all this here stuff, is that they're concentrating on that old skin and making people back into that old skin. And, Zuzecha said, well, yeah, it's new now, we're new. Crawls out and is all new, and go out and interact with Mother Earth, go back and be recharged by Mother Earth's energies. And down deep, people recognize that and they understand that. Example, if you take a look at someone like even back in the old times in 638, like Asclepius, who used to heal people in caves. He would take them in caves and there'd be water in their steam, and he'd pray with them, and he'd listen to their dreams and listen to their visions, and he'd doctor them and give them. And then he came out with a staff, a staff, a tree of life, he called it. And later on, that very staff was brought into the healing field. And if you look at that staff today, it stands there like this, and what's around it? What's around that staff? A zuzecha, a snake, you know. It's a healing snake, a healing staff. And in 1952, they put another zuzecha, another snake on there, became the medicine, or the medical symbol, you know, of healing. So if we look at all those teachers like that teach us along the line and throughout history, we see how we've interpreted, reinterpreted, utilized. We'll be able to learn a lot from our relatives. And imagine this, imagine two, maybe let's say two Omakashkan, two sitting there and they're videoing each other, and one says, well, if we could just listen to these humans and we might hear something, you know. You know, kind of thing. So they too have feelings, these humans. They too have thoughts. They too have vision. They too have dreams. And they too have, you know, you go, really? So, yeah.
You know, it's interesting because a lot of folks have talked about the kind of disconnect in mainstream society. We talk about, oh, that's a cow, and they're not real smart. They're kind of herd animal, and they're described in a very limited scientific way. But if you talk to any rancher, whether he's an Indian or a non-Indian, he'll talk about the personality of each one of those animals that he knows, and a sense of mourning for loss, or he learns something from them. So even in mainstream society, they, at one level you say, no, it's simple, it's not anything. But when they actually have interacted with him, oh no, that's a very complex being that's out there.
Absolutely. And everyone, when I was growing up, we had, you know, probably 500 head, and every one of those cows had names. I knew them by name. I could go out there, and I didn't know there was a lot of names. I just knew that was who, you know. I said, watch that one, it likes to bump up against that one right there. So we got to keep that, you know. And each one of them, they had their weight. They had their the other thing in with that is that you learn a lot by, like I said, going back into, I had to become like for me personally, I had to become like a snake, a zuzecha. I had to become like a bear to go back in Mother Earth. I had to become like, in Humblecha, be put underground and closed off. So I knew by the third and fourth day, I knew when it was night, I knew when it was daytime, I knew what, because I was underground, there's no light, nothing. Yet I knew when it was morning. I knew when the birds would sing. I knew when it was getting towards morning because the snakes would wake up and they start crawling. I knew the different kinds of snake. The rattlesnake that would crawl overhead, and because we were underground, sitting underground, so they crawl overhead and go, you know, and then the bull snake sound like a long train and go, and as it crawled on by, you know, and all the different snakes, you can tell what they had, you know, and then you can tell by the birds when the sun was coming up, and then pretty soon you can tell when the sun was up, you know, and the Tashiagnup would be some of the first ones. The meadowlarks would come and say, well, they tell you about the day that's coming, you know, in the daytime, and then pretty soon all the other birds show up, you know, and then when the evening's coming again. So when you're sitting in the ground, you hear all of this life. And then when I was a younger boy, when I got nervous, I got really scared, you know. And then, but as you get older and older, pretty soon, you long for that. When can I go back in Mother Earth so I can learn these lessons? When can I go back and to hear, to refresh my memory again of all these relatives? The day announces itself. You can tell when the day is coming. You can tell when it's day, when it's night, when the night is coming. Then the hiha, you know, the owl, they announce it, you know. Early in the morning, they announce it again. So all these relatives, they teach you so much when you sit there in the dark, you listen. And so you get to know these relatives. And then when you come back out in daytime, then you connect with them. You know when this is coming. Oh, wana apauelo, wana the apo lecha, the dawn is coming now. And you listen to those relatives that talk to you, pray, send their voice to Creator during that time. So each one of these ways, they teach every single relative there. They teach us. They teach us how to work with one another and how to interact with one another. That's it. Not one better than another.
Right. In referencing when you use the language, then do you see a striking difference with, because you continue to use the phrase relative or relation or nation, so you talk about snake nation or bird people. With the English language, there's a diminutive kind of thing about animals, that they're somehow kind of lesser. In your understanding of the language, is that they think of them more as not less but equal, or in some ways having greater knowledge or insight than even the average?
Yeah, in Lakota, there's nothing greater, nothing less. It's all Wakantanka, it's all Creator. But we're all different parts of that. Not one greater, not one less, but interactive. So the way that I reconnect with Creator is to reconnect with everything else. The more reconnections I have, the more the Creator is there. And it's not for Creator's benefit, it's just for me to realize that what a privilege it is to be a relative and to be able to relate, to be relative, and to be a relation. Those are powerful teachings because, for example, in the human sense, if you said, okay, you're an uncle and your nephew doesn't treat you well, how your nephew treats you isn't the lesson, isn't your responsibility. Your responsibility is to be an uncle no matter what. That someday when your nephew becomes an uncle, he'll understand what uncle is. Same with maybe auntie and Queen Kosha, maybe auntie and niece. Is that niece don't treat you well, you continue being an auntie no matter what. So the day that she becomes auntie, she'll know what an auntie is. That's the most important thing. So the relationship that you have, and it's the same way with our relatives. Just because it's a relative, I wouldn't go kiss a rattlesnake on the lips, We know our social distance, we know our relationship with one another, and the same way. So that way we know the social realm, social understanding, the lessons that we have in that way. So.
Right. There isn't a label of good or bad. A shark is not evil, or more important, a worm is not any less important than a human being. There's a role that they play.
99.9% the same.
Right.
So,
right.
But for example, give an example of that, like we say, I seen on TV, it says that the terrible wrath or something of the earth, and I had I have a friend who from Japan who was telling me when they had the tsunami over there that everybody fled back towards the mountaintop, and they found along the way there's like little prayer temples, and about halfway up there they found those prayer temples. People took refuge there, and then pretty soon there's over an area, a big old bushy area, so they cleaned that up, kind of taking care of it. Cleaned it up here. There was a stone marker there, and it had to be at least a couple thousand years old. And that stone marker said, "Do not build below this stone marker." So, it's not the earth's wrath. It's the way we put ourselves in a position of, you know, and we can go in the interstate and truck runs over one of our relatives, and we can stand there in the interstate, you know, and the relative gets hit, and we can say the wrath of the truck, you know, or what a terrible thing, you know. That's what I meant by common sense.
Right.
Common sense is one of the greatest gifts that we have as a common human, you know, in a common way of life. So that, because nature operates on common sense. In other words, it does the same things over and over and over, so common that some of us call it miraculous, mysterious.
Right. Well, that's perfect. This is done. You've done it. Really do appreciate it, and always let people, if they have a comment at the end. You've had a nice kind of transition there, but if in terms of the audience, then part of what we're trying to do is the non-native, or particularly children.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and if there's any, sometimes people like to make a comment that way. You know, if you were talking to children right now, and they were asking about animals, is there a message that you would leave with them at the end? I mean, you've said a lot already.
Yeah, the main message is that these are your relatives, and understand them because they understand you already, and understand yourself so you know how to make that relation. That's really important, and realize that the Creator that made all of life and made all of us, so that we have that. If you want to, you can really look inside and have ability to communicate. The other way is to communicate by your social distance, doing the research and reading about different plants and animals, and then going and working with them. But don't ever think that the human being is the most important.